background. And one grantee reported yesterday after the session that they could hear someone eating cereal. Also, if you have using the telephone, please do not put us on hold. However, if you have questions about the narrative, then you should write them down and send them to us so that we can try to get you some guidance as soon as possible. Of course, we're talking about the 2013 SAR that you're currently collecting data. I think that's all the housekeeping rules. As you know, a little background, the SAR of a collection of grantee representatives along with an expert and foundation staff. The benefit or the purpose of SAR is twofold. Certainly it helps the foundation exercise its responsibility in terms of grant administration to see that funds that are being used, how they're being used, to be able to report on achievements and accomplishments, also for some monitoring and performance. The second purpose should be for an internal purpose for the benefit of each grantee. It's data that you would want to be collecting. We would hope that was certainly the initial intent, that allows you to measure your performance and your productivity, to be able to report not only to your board but also to the public your achievements and accomplishments. Without the kind of data we request, you would have to probably rely upon anecdotal examples. This data you're sending in is really the only centralized collective data of legal services in Texas. As such, we provide it to the Supreme Court, not all of it when upon request, or things or instances of where we want to show the outstanding performance of legal aid programs across Texas. But we also receive requests routinely from the legislature, the state bar, when we go to Washington to visit with members of Congress. It's always good to have the kind of data that we're collecting. Therefore, it's important that it's reliable and accurate. Any inaccurate data that's submitted by grantees can throw the whole report, the whole data out of whack. It can be then very unreliable. And if it's unreliable, then we couldn't share it and benefit from it. Also, we understand how this sometimes happens when you have turnover in grantees and duties change. That transition of data collection might sometimes get lost. It's important, we thought, in reviewing 2011 and 2012 data, we saw a lot of discrepancies, or not a lot, but enough to merit going over the SAR again to make sure that you understand what we're asking and where we think it should go, because that uniformity is really crucial. All right, so let's go to the first slide. Next. Jessica? Here we go. All right, now before anyone begins to collect data, you probably want to visit this document. This document is in the attachments and web grants. It covers essential definitions that will help guide you in terms of where you put and what you put in there. It gives you definitions between case and legal information. It talks about what is the number of persons affected, where you report in outcomes. It gives you the definition of what compensated private attorneys and judicare are. It also breaks up what's limited action and what's extended services, a breakdown that you would need to know in one of the components. All right, next. And we're going to share with you where you can find that document if you have any problems. I think Jessica's going to come up with an easy visual instruction. Again, this just really talks about the process. In order for data collection and data reporting, you need to make sure that you can report how you accrue the data and how you report it. So in case ever audited or questioned or need to fall back on how you came up with what you should have a process written out and defined. You know, from how the data is collected, who collects it, where it goes, who puts it in, who reviews it. All right, next. Jessica, there we go. All right, we did say we weren't going to touch upon the narrative questions. One thing we do want you to know is that we're going to limit the narrative responses. So you're going to have to be concise. Also, we want you to, and many of you are doing, if not all, doing outstanding. We want you to make sure that you don't repeat what you put in previous years. If you do, if it's necessary as a background, that's fine. But don't just copy and paste, because we actually do compare previous year's responses. And if it's verbatim, then it shows that, at least it indicates that you may not be taking the time to make sure you respond to each question. Also, it's helpful if you focus on, when talking about achievements and accomplishments, it'd be nice if you delineate that if it's TAGIF funded. That can be very helpful because while the SAR reports on all your program activity for free civil legal services to the poor, it's nice to be able to directly link some accomplishments or achievements that benefited as a result of TAGIF funds. All right, next. All right, when you go in to do your web grants data, these are each of the components. And these actually mirror the spreadsheets that you've been using in years past. They may look a little bit different, but that's because of the format of web grants. But there has been very few changes. What we have done is try to put in a few more instructions. All right, next. And we're going to touch upon those components that are statistical. This is the first cover sheet. We used to call it cover sheet on the spreadsheet, and it just kept its name. Well, a couple of things we want to point out. The staff cases closed, the pro bono attorneys cases closed, and the reduced fee cases closed. Those numbers should total the number you have total for under the case service report. And the case service report, or CSR, is going to be upcoming shortly, but it's where you report how cases are closed, level of service, and also by problem type. That total should total these three columns. Another thing is on the compensated and reduced fee private attorney cases closed field, that's not referring to attorneys that you have on contract, that you don't view as permanent, that may be temporary. That is not what that column collects. There are programs that actually pay private attorneys an hourly rate reduced to represent clients on specific cases. Normally it occurs in rural settings where you don't have an office in a particular community, you want to provide services, so you've made arrangement with a private attorney. The attorney bills per hour is not a contract for like on a staff attorney. So that's what that column reflects. Another thing in terms of rejected applicants or receive less than full representation. As you know now, monthly we're collecting that data. Before this has been asked for a number of years, and far too many grantees were reporting zero. And we appreciate that because we understand how grantees want to show how everyone who approaches them, who applies, gets some level of service, is touched or benefited from, and we appreciate that. But we also are challenged with how do we show those people that can't get help because of limited resources or other reasons, conflicts, outside priorities. So we have been asking you to track that monthly, and with much success. To be honest with you, we're now seeing I think probably more realistic numbers in terms of people who could benefit if you had more resources. And again, we're looking at data that can be supportive of how, if we had more resources, how these people might get help. That number for the calendar year for say 2013 should equal your monthly totals, January through December. And so you're already keeping that. You should be able just to pop that in at the 12 months for the calendar year. And so hopefully that will be helpful. All right, next. All right, this is what's called Annual Closed Case Summary Report, but we shorten it for abbreviation for CSR. I think we wanted just to emphasize a couple of things. And that is, remember now, the total on the bottom of all cases should equal the total of those 3 columns in the cover sheet. We can't tell you the number of times we've received reports where that doesn't equal. And then, as you know, we've been trying to follow up with all our grantees when we see these kind of discrepancies. It'd be nice if we had a web grant where we could, it would be an error message, and I think we're looking into it. Where if it doesn't reconcile where it should. But right now, we want you to make sure that you review it and it does. Also, all your cases, regardless of TAGIF funded, should be reported in here, provided the following. Number one, it has to be free civil legal services. They have to be cases, not legal information, not clinics where you're giving general information. They have to be cases, and cases defined in the definitions section that we talked about earlier. Also, as I said, it must be free. So programs that require an appointment or consultation fee or have a reduced fee or what have you, we can't include those cases in here. Also, it must be to low-income individuals, meaning low-income either using TAGIF guidelines, income guidelines, or using LSE income guidelines. Remember, TAGIF has several now. We have 125% of federal poverty. We have 187.5% with crime victims. We have 200% if you get a veterans grant. LSE has its income guidelines. So that's something to remember. It has to be free, and it has to be low income. All right, next. And we turn this over to, yeah.
I believe this is my section. These are cases closed only during the reporting period by ethnicity and age. This number, the grand total, should match your closed case summary total, and also the front page, the cover sheet. The only exception would be if you had one or more group cases where ethnicity and age obviously would not be tracked for individual clients, or even for the institution, obviously. So the total on this page will equal the cover sheet, the annual closed case summary, and the case is closed by county unless you have group cases, or if there's an instance where a client refuses to provide you ethnicity and or age. Next. This one's very straightforward with the exception of not reported, and it's been my view that I can't imagine that you can formulate or enter into an attorney-client relationship without knowing the gender of your client. So we are considering removing not reported, but we wanted to speak with the groups before making that decision just to see if there's something that we're missing. If you have some thoughts about this, please email one of us or chat it in your chat box right now, your concerns. I know yesterday transgendered persons who are in transition was raised. I'm comfortable with, and it seemed like the group was very comfortable with, the notion that a person's gender is determined by what they tell you it is based on where they are in that process. So, so that you just go with that. And if they, you know, if they don't tell you, then I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't why it wouldn't be on an intake form or it's not asked. So we're just kind of, if they say, if you do ask, I don't know if this is a training issue for intake staff, but if you give them a form, I don't know how that works. So if that's a concern for anyone in terms of how you identify someone who's in the process of changing the gender that the doctor determined they were born with at the time that they were born, then I don't know if that's an issue. Next. And then these are our cases closed by the substantive legal area, or no, these aren't. These are cases closed by how the client kind of would be identified. So is it a victim of domestic violence? Is it a victim of a crime other than domestic violence? A person with a disability, an inmate, undocumented immigrant, migrant worker, homeless person, persons with terminal illness or HIV, veterans. We don't have an other category because these are the kinds of things that we have determined through the process that we went through a number of years ago that we wanted to identify. If there are others that you think would be helpful to you in terms of knowing in the state categories of people by a profile, then please let us know what those are, and we can at least consider. When you let us know what those are, please make any arguments you can for why we should be tracking that as well, and we will consider adding those in. Please also know that in this case, someone can be in multiple categories. They can be a victim of domestic violence and also a person with disability. Also, we had previously a persons with disabilities separate pullout that you would have seen on last year's report, but you won't see on this year's report, because we just pulled it out in preparation for this SAR webinar and moved it into this category. No matter what, we're not, obviously, I think it's obvious, but I want to state it anyway, we're not just looking for persons with a disability law type of case. So we want to identify all persons who may have some form of mental or physical disability, regardless of what type of civil legal case was taken on their behalf. Next.
We never have. And I don't know. Okay, we don't do a category. Straightforward.
We're hearing some background. We're hearing some background noise of whoever, wherever that's coming from. Could you mute that for us?
Your voice device on mute, that would be great. Thank you. The cases closed by county, just put the number of closed cases in the field, county where the case is closed. The total in this form should match that on the CSR. The open cases by county, these are the open cases that you have at the end of the reporting year. On that date, December 31st, reporting year, and that will roll over into the next year.
And this is our ability to, our attempt to try to respond to all of the work that's being done on behalf of individuals who are low income in the state, but for whom you do not enter into an attorney-client relationship. So that's very key here. The only instances of service or activity on behalf of persons here would be those in which no attorney-client relationship was formed. And an example of this is HVLP's courtroom booth, where they have an attorney and a paralegal on site at the courthouse to provide information as to forms to use, how to file, basic information regarding how to complete forms. So what we're looking for here is how many people received that kind of assistance from a booth like that, or if you, one of the things that George Elliott was saying about Lamwit earlier before people came on was that they provide packets. So you can see where there's a space for you to record how many informational or pro-se packets were distributed to people. That information will be recorded here. So all kinds of there's all kinds of work that staff and organizations do on behalf of people where there's actually no representation by the organization. And hopefully there are enough opportunities here for you to record all of that. Again, if you find that there's something that you do that has significant impact and in which you would record significant numbers that you think should be added in, please share that with us, and we will take that under advisement. Next.
All right, this is an outcome measurement. A couple of things. First, the total of major benefits or outcomes may not total the number of cases you close. Not every case is going to have a measurable outcome. So that's something to keep in mind. Second, the contested and uncontested columns, that definition is back in that document we were talking about where you have key definitions. Read it. Obviously, contested is where there's an adverse party and the party contests the case, and uncontested is where there's no adverse party or the adverse party does not contest. Number of persons affected, for some reason, also could be substituted as benefited. That number should not, normally, it should not total the number of cases closed. What we suggest is normally a default might be the household. If you benefit one person in a household, there are indirect benefits that can impact everyone in that household. How you calculate the number of persons impacted or affected is something that we haven't given you too much guidance. I mean, we have some suggestions, and in fact, we're going to give you I think that will be included in the frequently asked questions and answers. But normally, it's a case-by-case basis. There may be situations where the only benefit or person affected is the client, but you should not always assume that's it. The reason is because we want to show how legal aid not only impacts the person being represented, but has a broader impact on households and communities. So that's what that attempt is. All right, next. Okay, that's Lisa, I think, right? Wait, we can't hear Lisa. We still can't hear Lisa.
Sorry, I muted myself and I forgot. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, I muted myself and then I forgot that I muted myself because I didn't want any background noise to interfere. This is your legal services in-house staffing, where we are trying to find out how many people it takes to run your operation. So, one of the things that is stated in here is that we are not looking for attorneys who provide, or I think it's stated, if it's not, I'm sorry, maybe it should be, but we're not looking for any kinds of volunteer attorney work unless, for example, you had maybe a retired attorney or a brand new attorney who hadn't gotten a job yet and they wanted to come in and actually work in your organization as a staff person doing something other than providing work on pro bono cases where primarily the bulk of the work may be done outside of your office. I guess you could even have a brand new attorney who only does pro bono cases, discrete cases on behalf of individuals that have been assigned to them, but they do it in your office because maybe they don't have an office yet. I don't think we're looking for those people, but we are looking for, if you have an attorney who is doing the full panoply of work in your office that the other attorneys in your office do. and making use of maybe assistance and all of that, then they would be counted there. So it's you know, there may be some gray area, and if there ever is and you're confused, please let us know. But what we want to do, what we want to be able to do is look back over time at budgets and things like that and staffing, and just make sure that the evolution of your staffing, you know, seems to have there's some connection to budget and those kinds of things. So we can't do that if you're putting pro bono attorneys in and out and that sort of thing. So the other thing is, it says, but I want to reiterate, we want all staff people counted to the degree they work, you know, whatever part-time, full-time, and we want them all added together so that 2 half-time people equals 1 FTE, 1 full-time equivalent, and again stated as decimals. I think that is it.
All right, volunteer statistics.
Actually, can I say one more thing about that, Jonathan?
Sure.
Can you go back one more time, Jessica? One of the things that I really want to go ahead and start to tie together, because if y'all have any questions about it, then I want y'all to please raise them with us either in an email or a chat or at the end of this session, because we've been having a discussion about it ourselves. I think there's some confusion about all the volunteer and pro bono stuff that is recorded, because it's recorded in different sections. And so one of the things that I want to tie this volunteer staff to is that volunteer staff could be recorded. Could it be recorded, Jonathan, on the volunteer, the last volunteer section where you have attorney support and law students? Would volunteer staff that's doing work here, would their work also be recorded on that last page?
No, I don't think so. I
Okay,
think
so those are just going to be on that last. It's not called volunteer statistics. I think it's called volunteer. I can't remember the full title of that page, but we'll get to it in a minute, and I'll point it out to you.
Yeah, it's called number of volunteers providing service, and we'll get to that in 2 slides.
We will get to it, but my point is that whatever is counted here as volunteer staff, we think would not also be counted there. Is that correct?
Right. You wouldn't want double count.
Okay. That's all.
All right.
I just want to point out that there's...
All right. Now this is excuse me, where we report pro bono work is being done across Texas. As I mentioned earlier, we're the only database, to my knowledge, that really collects, centralize all of the services and activities being provided to low-income people, advocacy. So it's crucial that we try to make sure that people understand what's being asked and where it goes. Now, and this section probably is even more, is the most confusing to many. It certainly confuses us sometimes in-house. But the first section is regarding just general information. It should be self-explanatory, but a lot of times people aren't filling in the blanks. Number of attorneys in program service area. Even if you don't have a pro bono program per se, you should report that anyways. And your service area is what counties you serve. Where you get that data, you can go to the State Bar of Texas, and they provide that data. That's something you should be thinking about, because when we visit programs, we always encourage programs, regardless how difficult, is to reach out to the legal community, try to recruit volunteers. It's not only a great component in terms of additional delivery of services, but also it builds support. It can have financial positive implications, just a number of things. So first, identify the number of attorneys that are licensed in your service area. The second one is, if you have a pro bono panel, regardless of whether they're taking cases or not, how many do you have on it? I mean, that's just should be something you have. And then again, the third category is something not only it's helpful statewide so we get a sense of the number of new attorneys taking cases, but you should be using this to gauge how successful you are in recruiting the lawyers. And that is, and when we talk about new attorneys, we're not talking about newly licensed. We're talking about attorneys that have not been involved in your program, and you've recruited them and they've agreed to take a case. Now, some people will say, well, what if they haven't taken a case in 12 months or 18 months? Well, technically, that's still not a new attorney. They are familiar with your program. They've been working with your program. We're trying to get a sense of how many new lawyers are we bringing into the fold for legal advocacy. The second section, reported hours. These are just pure hours. One on case services and others on other services. And there's some brief definitions as to case services. Obviously, except they're representing a client, or they provided legal services, limited services to a client. Other services can go to mentoring. Now, some people say, well, if they're mentoring, they're really handling a case. Not really, because handling a case means you're the lead attorney, you have established an attorney-client relationship. Mentoring, while valuable, and it's certainly not demeaning that important role they're playing, it should be categorized or classified as other services. Then the third arrow talks about number of pro bono cases. Now, those two fields should equal the cover sheet reporting of pro bono cases. Again, this is where there should be some reconciliation. Limited services and extended services is also defined in that definition document that we've referred to previously. Limited service, briefly is, counsel advice, and extended services goes into the negotiation, court decision, what have you. All right, next. All right. Now, this is the column that Lisa was referring to, where if you have someone who's providing services, and I think yesterday we had a question about what if someone who is using a volunteer psychologist or a sociologist or what have you. That probably could be reported in the support category. Now, this is just talking about bodies, people. Number of volunteers providing services. And you have the case services, other services. These are just numbers of people during the calendar year. It's not cases, it's not hours, just people again. And then where the arrow is in this section, compensated private attorneys, as we've talked about previously, this is not where you have an attorney on a contract and they're coming in part-time or they're working out of their home or what have you, but they're taking cases regularly. They're getting paid a salary or what have you. This is where you have a private attorney where the program is paying their fee, their hourly billable fee on a case or some other matter. And this is, again, this goes to number. This is not hours, this is not cases, these are just numbers. Number of private attorneys you have taking cases would be the first one. Number of attorneys you've had to hire to maybe staff a clinic or provide mentoring. And then number of people who are on a panel but did not provide a service. And then whatever your hourly rate that you reported there, compensation rate. Sometimes it's 40, sometimes it used to be 25, could be 45, I'm not sure what the going, but it has to be a market rate below, it has to be a rate that's below market rate. Otherwise, it can't be considered reduced fee for adjudicator. I guess you could report it still, but then you might want to, if you're paying someone $150 an hour or $200 an hour, I think someone would question, wonder why you're paying such high. All right, next on benefits, is this mine?
No, this one's mine.
Okay, good.
This is where you are representing not individuals but legal entities that are needing your services for the purposes of obtaining incorporation with tax problem, tax issues, tax exempt status, any kind of structural or governance, helping bylaws, those kinds of things. I know TRLA has a project that does quite a bit of this, and so you're representing the legal entity, not the individuals that are speaking for the legal entity. Active cases in this circumstance are different from most of our other circumstances. If you worked on it at all during the reporting year, if you worked on behalf of this group during the reporting year on this case, then you, whether it's continued to be open or closed, then you report it. You're reported here as one that has had some work on it, even though it may now be closed. In this instance, a closed case would be an active case because you worked on it at some point during the calendar year. And then this is the kind of the substantive legal area or the kind of topic area that where you plug in those cases. So it was it a consumer group, an education group, and the number here on the benefits from legal representation where it's types of groups represented should match the nature of the benefits obtained. I think they should match. Now, I'm sorry, but now that I am thinking about this again, it's occurring to me that maybe they wouldn't match if you did a number of different things on behalf of the same group. Would you count it twice, Jonathan? So say for a consumer group, you obtained incorporation, and then you also drafted their bylaws. Would you say that...
It would just be reported once. If that one group, this is just to identify the number of groups you're assisting, not the number of cases for each group.
So these numbers will not match necessarily. They might, but they would not necessarily match. Okay, thank you.
Right.
That's all.
Okay, next. And it looks like we're going to have to move rather quickly if we want to get some answers. There's great questions on the chat that we would like to be able to cover. Dollar outcomes. Let's see. All right. Again, this is not every case is going to have a dollar outcome, but it's something you should be thinking about and reporting if a case does have dollar outcomes. And we're talking about affirmative monetary awards achieved. Debts reduced, payments avoided, that's in the very last column. And how you determine that is done internally, and you should have a reasonable basis again, some justification. Also, when you report an award, say you get a $1 million judgment against someone who is indigent, delinquent, what have you, there's no chance in collecting, then it's probably something you don't want to report, because the idea is not just, it's not the paper or what says on the paper, but what in actuality can be realized by our clients. I mean, to benefit their lives. I mean, sure, it's great they have their day in court, they have a judgment, but they're never going to see the light of day of it. I mean, then you may not want to report it. We want to show, this is data that we have shared previously with economists in terms of doing some calculations as to the economic benefit and impact legal aid has. So these numbers should be as reasonable and accurate as possible. And then there's a question like, what do we count as a benefit? You know, when do we, is it an order when obtained or when it's enforced? I mean, we don't expect you to keep cases open so you can track. I mean, if you have a reasonable basis that the payment's going to be made, the support's going to be paid, you know, then you can report that. Again, this is something internally you should be uniform and consistent in terms of how you calculate and how you report. And if in doubt, err on the conservative side. A few wild guesses reduces the overall credibility of the report. Let's see. What else can we say about cost savings, everything? Oh, one thing we did, in family law alimony, we've been looking over these, as some of you might know, because we've had to follow up. Obviously, that's where you put spousal maintenance. We don't have alimony in Texas yet. I don't think so. We should probably change that at some day. I don't know why. It's probably these categories were developed on a nationwide scale by a consultant, and so many states have alimony. Texas, we don't. We have spousal maintenance, so we need to change that if we can. All right. Anything else I can think? I think that's pretty much it. Next.
All right. We just have a couple more slides for you guys. And then
How did they get a picture of me?
We'll
Who
get
took that?
guys out. All right. So I'm going to briefly go over the financial report. Let's see. All right. This form must coincide with the calendar year January 1st through December 31st. So the IOLTA funds, BCLS funds, CDCLS funds, those won't necessarily coincide with your grant amount for the grant year. For veterans funds and other TAGF funds, report in the 4th column over, and all other funds report in the 5th column. That total will automatically populate for you. If the other category exceeds 10% of the grand total, please include a breakdown at the bottom. You'll select the Add button, and that will take you to a pop-up that you can enter in the amount with the items, similar to this foundations box right here. Okay. And then the sources of funding for legal services activities and revenue. Here you will include all revenue. The highlighted letters to the right here, E, F, I, L, O, Q, those you need to provide a breakdown. And that looks something like this. So you'll scroll down, you'll see this breakdown box, select the Add button, and then it'll take you to where you can include the foundation name, for example, and the amount. And that total will populate the top portion, which looks like this. Also, if you have a subgrant from LSC or TAGF, then you will include that in a breakdown that will not populate this top portion. That subgrant is most likely included in the organization where you get that subgrant from, so we don't want duplicate data.
So can I repeat that, Jessica? That's very important.
Sure.
If you get a subgrant, say from an LSC funded program, and it's LSC funds, you do not report that in LSC, Legal Services Corporation revenue line item. Why? Because we've already received, that's being reported by the actual grantee, LSC grantee. The same is true if you get, I think currently we only have one subgrant who's receiving BCLS funds. Do not report that, though. We could have more next grant cycle or future grant cycles. Don't report it unless you get it directly. You report it as a subgrant, as Jessica had mentioned. Because otherwise we're getting double reporting. No, that's it.
Right. And I went over this. That's it. That's it for today.
Oh, one other thing I wanted to point about the expenditures. Please make sure that you put in the accurate amounts about your TAGF funding. We report we run cumulative reports on all this, and those numbers really need to match what we awarded out there. So, and on the revenue, every year nationally, IOTA programs across the country compile a national report on funding for legal aid. So you need to make sure it's as accurate as possible and detailed as possible. For an example, also, where you put things are very important. If you have a bar campaign, a private bar campaign where a bar association is helping you raise money, you probably would want to put that in the line item for bar association so that we can track all bar association fundraising initiatives. If it's just listed in fundraising, then it gets grouped into a different category. This also, if under university or law school, one thing you remember, we're only reporting on funding for legal aid, so we're talking about revenues to support your legal aid program. We have grantees where legal aid is not their primary purpose, where legal services is a department component, and they have other multiple services. So you're going to have to determine what's your formula in terms of their support of your legal services program. For an example, the law school has a clinical program, but that clinical program also has criminal defense work. It has services to moderate or no income guidelines. You can't include that kind of support for those programs into civil legal services. And the reason is because we're trying to get as honest data as to actual available funding that's being received to support civil legal services to the poor. So we certainly don't want revenues inflated or deflated. We want as reliable and accurate as possible. Now it looks like it's 10:50, and we want to thank everyone for participating. We have some great questions. I guess if it's all right with everyone, we can quickly try to answer some of those questions on chat. We pretty much have finished the presentation, and as you know, we're going to send out a PowerPoint to everyone. Is that what we're going to do, or we're going to link it to online on our website, Jessica?
I think I can send the PowerPoint.
All right, we'll send the PowerPoint. Now, do you want to try to answer these questions quickly, or if those that have to leave, we would understand. You're certainly welcome to adjourn. We'll try to answer some of the questions that we haven't been able to answer so far. One was about the gender of a client, and what about transgender? Again, we've had that discussion where whether we should include not reported in terms of gender. Also, there was a question regarding the same question. We've had LGBTQ clients who don't like to identify as one or the other, and also someone asked about what if they don't give their gender or race or ethnicity. I think as to the gender, we'll talk. If we think that there's enough interest to keep not reported, we should keep it. We certainly want to do that. We'll consider grantees' wishes. In terms of race and ethnicity, you know, as Lisa had mentioned earlier, if not in this session, in that session, we can talk about it. How do you establish an attorney-client relationship if you don't have certain personal information about your client?
Can I ask a question? Did the TRLA staff get back on? They had sent a message that they were no longer on. And I just, Mary Ortegon? Okay, I just wanted to check. We'll have to follow up with them and see when we lost them.
All right, what about if they can't get race or ethnicity, Lisa?
If they can't get ethnicity or age, you know, I don't know. Our form says that it needs to match. I believe it says we need to match, yeah, the cover sheet, the annual closed case summary, the cases closed by county. So in the past, I don't think this has been an issue. I don't recall this being a really big issue when I was reviewing my SARs this time around. But I do think, I mean, I'm thinking maybe incorrectly that they are, well, we do say that unless it's a group case or a client refuses to disclose their ethnicity, and I guess too their age. Although how do you represent someone if you're not certain that they're, first of all, over the age of majority, so you're asking the age for that purpose. There may be benefits that come to certain age groups that you, so I mean, I really think you would be getting that information at intake, and that you would really, like you would citizenship or some other things that you would be, or some sort of status, legal status, that you would just be requiring as a part of your intake process that they provide that information. Now, ethnicity can be dicier, I guess, and so maybe that is one that there would be circumstances where you didn't know, and that's okay, because we say unless the clients refuse to disclose ethnicity.
Lisa, this is
so
Deborah.
Can you what?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. Just a point of clarification. Occasionally, someone doing intake will just not enter that answer. I don't know how, but you know, people aren't perfect. We don't walk on water. It occasionally happens.
Sure.
What we've done in the past, and I guess I'm just looking for validation of the practice by the foundation, what we do is we just, if we forgot to get an age, we enter the average age. I mean, if the average applicant's age is like 42, we just put 42. Is that okay? I mean, it doesn't really matter. We just need to fill an empty data field, right?
No, I disagree. I don't think that would be a sound approach. I think that it distorts your data overall, and it can. You probably should identify the number of cases you're not getting age in and deal with it in sort of a more methodical manner. You know, I'd rather see
probably 10 to 15 instances out of 22,000 applicants. I don't think it's going to distort anything. But because every victim funder wants to have a solid number, all the numbers have to match, we have to do something. And when the client, you can't reach them anymore, because generally these are just advice cases that happened out in the field or something where you're not entering directly into the database. So in these few instances, we just put an average. I really don't know what else to do unless you can give us better guidance.
Well, I don't think that's a bad practice, as long as it really is 10 or 15 cases. But I think
absolutely, probably less than 10 to 15, but there's just those few.
Well, the problem is you're not just talking about Lone Star. You're talking about all the other grantees who have different size volumes of intake. If you have a practice where if a field isn't filled, you make up a number, then I don't think that would be acceptable. I appreciate the position you're in. I'd rather not have the numbers reconcile and have real numbers of people that you're serving, age or race or ethnicity, as opposed to popped-in numbers that really aren't accurate. I mean, they're not truthful. I'd rather not have the numbers reconciled. I mean, if it's only 10 or 15, it's not going to make a big difference.
Do we just add a footnote and say in
well,
these
then we
cases
need to change.
Yeah, I think a footnote.
We need to change our forms then.
Because LSC does the same. They want them to match, and they don't want us to give them a footnote. But, I mean, we can do it either way. It's just that we all know in 22,000 applicants, you're going to get a few where you've left out some data field, and occasionally it's age.
Yeah, well, and you know, LSC has its own issues and problems and what motivates them.
Probably a question I should have asked, but I just thought
we understand. And the same thing is true. There was another question I think raised about not including dollar outcomes on advice in limited services. And I think that's correct, unless you have some basis to believe that because a direct outcome, if you gave advice or if you wrote a demand letter and the client got $250, unless you have some reason to include any dollar outcome, just writing a demand letter, not knowing if it worked, or giving advice, not knowing, you're absolutely correct. You wouldn't. And as I said, not every case will have an outcome. dollar outcome or measurable outcome. Those numbers won't match.
We just couldn't ever verify it, and I felt funny about telling people to put an outcome in where we didn't have proof that they got it, or at least proof that they were awarded it in that case. So, but I didn't want to err on the side of being too conservative if everybody else was going the other way. But if you're confirming our practice is right, that's great, and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yeah, we'd rather err on being conservative.
Okay.
What other questions we want to, Lisa, Jessica, do you see questions you want to answer?
No, I did just say that we will change our forms accordingly so that it's clearer.
All right. There was a question about collecting data regarding persons with terminal illness. Do you have to, or HIV? You only report it if you comfortably can get it. You certainly, we're not collecting data to embarrass, or if it's not data that you collect normally in the pursuit of handling a particular type of case. We don't want everyone to be asked the same question. Do you have a terminal illness? If you're assisting them in an eviction, unless it's somehow related, I mean, I don't think you need to be asking all these questions. It's just whether you reasonably come across this information. And there were a bunch of other questions too. I think it's 11 o'clock. I think we've been on long enough. It's been our pleasure to visit with you today. And we know this has not been exciting, but it's important that there's a uniformity as to what's being asked and where it goes, so that we can continue to provide stakeholders important information about the important work that you're doing. So I think I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Jessica, did you say you moved to adjourn?
Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.